In Squadron 42, the story is quite vast and very deep. And to be able to handle this properly, we've actually taken the story itself and broke it into two different production teams. The first is cinematics, and they are primarily concerned with things such as the through line of the story, the major plot points that take you from the beginning of the game through towards the end of the game. Squadron 42 is considerably deeper than just the main through points. And we wanted to build a more robust life, essentially, within every place that you're at in the world. And to be able to do that and to handle the production of that, we've created a second team, the gameplay story team. And this team is going to deal with things that may or may not be through line, but that add a greater depth and player experience to Squadron 42.
Yeah, gameplay story is different to cinematics in that there's often like a more interactive element. There might be an element of player choice or something else, like interacting with a cupboard door or something like that. Something that needs to happen in the world that means it's got an interactive gameplay element. It's something in between where it has an element of storytelling and cinematics to it, but it also has elements of gameplay mechanics.
In Squadron 42, the characters that you meet along the way that are on your battleship or in different locales, they all have their own lives. And you can interact with them and they will respond back to you or have conversations with you depending upon who they are and what their relationship is with you. This allows us to add a greater depth to the experience of Squadron 42. You don't just feel like you are being pushed from plot element to plot element to plot element, but you're actually living within this world. You're living on that battleship. These are actually living, breathing people that you're interacting with within the Star Citizen and Squadron 42 universe.
Part of gameplay story is absolutely critical to the main story, so you can't really make progress in the mission until you speak to the characters and get the information from them, with them sort of telling you where to go and what to do next and stuff like that. But also there are other characters who are completely incidental that you can go and talk to, and you can find out how they're feeling or what they're working on or doing, and there's a whole backstory to them just to make the whole world believable. So
depending upon the choices that you make in Squadron 42, different people will have different reactions towards you, and those reactions will change based upon the choices that you make. And that gives, instead of them having the same response every time you come to them, or no matter what you do, it's a canned response, they're actually responding to what you've done in the way that they would as a person in what their likes and dislikes are and things like this. So they're reacting to you like real people instead of a typical AI.
There's at least probably 250 gameplay story scenes that I'm currently looking at. I'm just trying to tackle those one at a time, really. Well, the first approach to the gameplay story was really just to get a handle on everything that had been recorded and how much we had to work with. The basic way we'd approach any gameplay story scene would be the same. The first thing we'd do was assemble all the assets, so the face animation, the body animation and the audio. We would take a look at the mocap that's been shot, usually the quad video, try and understand what the scene's all about, who's in the scene, what's the intention. So we'll work closely with design probably at the start when we're familiarising ourselves with the scene. So we'll talk over the scene with them, how they see it working, where it's going to fit in the world, etc. And then we'll go off and we'll assemble all the animations, build the scene, get it exported into the game, do a sort of first pass of it, and then we'll have to talk to design again and say, this is what we've got, can you help us get it working properly? So the main tools we'd use for gameplay story are, for the scene assembly, we'd start off working in Maya, using the Redline scene manager, building the face, body and audio assets together there. From there we'd export to the game, and then we'd probably use track view to do a previous pass on the scene so we can see it in the game quickly. Then when we're getting a bit more in depth, we'd go into Mannequin, set up our animations there with the correct tags and so forth. On the sub, to get things working, we'd probably use Subsumption, which is an in-house tool which is undergoing a lot of development work at the moment, and that's where all the magic happens really, and you touch the other more complicated parts of the game. So that's an interesting stage and one that we need a bit more design support for, but it's also where the animations really start to come to life and be interactive, so it's very cool. So we'll try and get things working in the game just in exactly the same way it's been shot, which is a great way of sort of revealing problems. And then I'll usually just try and solve them just one at a time. Okay, let's start with the biggest thing. What looks worst about this scene? Okay, let's fix that, and let's move on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And so hopefully you're arguing about very, very sort of small details. And if there is anything that we don't currently have the tech for, then you're going to call that out and ask for help for other departments to bring them involved, get them involved and help you solve something that maybe hasn't been solved in the game before. Our first step would be to get the face, body and audio animations working in-game. That's reasonably straightforward. Once we have that, where we can see what's been captured in-game, we can then decide how we're going to tackle the more complicated problems, sort of one at a time really. So the first steps are easy enough. After that, it gets a little more complicated. The motion capture doesn't always match up perfectly. Sometimes a performance has been pieced together, 2 different takes of mocap. So quite often some of the animation work we'll do will be to sort of blend over those little cuts in the mocap. Sometimes we need to capture a new idle to go in place for when the player's taking their time to make a choice. So we might even need to do some fresh mocap for that. Yeah, usually it takes a lot of work to get it from just the initial capture stage into something that's fully working in game and every aspect and every branch working correctly.
Another challenge that Gameplay Story needs to deal with is because we have these scenes that happen, they may have 1, 2, 3, 4 or more characters playing all at once. Those characters are not playing through just a linear editor. Those they have lives before this scene and they have lives after this scene. And the challenge with that team is to be able to work with the performance capture and create transitions and the technical ins and outs for these scenes so that characters, when they're running under AI code, can make their way to the scene properly. We can perform the experience and then they can exit to wherever it is that they need to go.
So once we've got a gameplay story scene in-game initially, we're then going to try and push that and get that to our final quality stage. So in doing so, we'll have a lot of different things to solve along the way. We might have to add the same sort of start and end poses to make sure animations work together, add an idle, maybe bring in some new mocap, maybe make sure the facial animation's working correctly, add in any player choice, implement scene branches, in a voice for the player. If there's a look at, if the player needs to look at somebody or the character, need to add that in. And then sometimes transitioning to and from an AI character as well. So there's a lot of different things you have to solve one at a time, and we just start with the biggest problem and solve that, move on to the next. And eventually when you can't see more problems, then you know you're more or less done.
I think a really important point within Squadron 42 and Star Citizen and overall in animation on this game is we try not to focus on the word AI, even though in the reality of it, it is a AI or it is AI code. What we're trying to achieve is that this is a living, breathing world. It's a living, breathing universe, and everybody who is in it has their own likes, their own dislikes, they have their own backstories. Even characters that you may fight against, instead of treating them like just a random guy on the screen, that person got there somehow, and they have some sort of goal, and that helps us to drive how those characters react, whether it is in a combat space or in a space like the gameplay story, adding far more depth to the gameplay experience.
I've worked in animation for a long time, so for me, animation is the light that that lights up the game. It's the most important thing for me. So yeah, I'm really keen on animation. I think it's if you look at something for the first time, the way it moves is probably the thing you'll see first. So I think it's hugely important. So I'm really enjoying working on the gameplay story, and I want to bring these scenes that have been captured into the game and bring that life into the ship, so that you're not just walking around an empty spacecraft, that there's real people there with real stories and interesting things going on the whole time. So yeah, no two gameplay story scenes are really the same. We have a massive range from simple little quick one-liners that are said during combat, up to full scenes and multiple characters, up to sort of 12 characters filling a room at a time with very dramatic things going on. And then we have everything in between. A lot of scenes will be just sort of 2 or 3 characters, you know, talking or doing or something or working on something. So, you know, I'm still discovering as I go through different aspects to gameplay story. So it's there's a lot of variety in there, and it's very interesting.